Welcome to Café of Delights, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. We are at the precipice of one of the most exciting evolutions in human history, from science to spirituality, culture, arts, cutting-edge psychotherapies, new economies, and more. We will explore how to create a world where all can thrive. In a series of riveting interviews, you'll have the opportunity to hear from those that are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. Join me, your host and author of the book Money Come Dance With Me, Gale West, to be inspired, delighted, and filled with hope for a new reality. Café of Delights starts now. And I'm your host, Gale West. This is Café of Delights, and I'm so excited to have Lynne Twist on as my guest today. She is just one of the most amazing people I know. Lynne is the founder of the Soul of Money Institute and the author of the best-selling book, Soul of Money, Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Life. Her newest book, Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. Over the past 40 years, Lynne has worked with over 100,000 people in 50 countries. Her clients include Microsoft, Procter & Gamble, the International Unity Church, Charles Schwab, United Way, the National Black Theater of Harlem, Harvard University, and many, many others. She has been a featured speaker for the United Nations Beijing Women's Conference, State of the World Forum, and Synthesis Dialogue with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, among others. Lynne is the recipient of the prestigious Woman of Distinction Award from the United Nations. Welcome, Lynne. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you, Gale. I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh,
you're so delightful.
You're such an amazing woman. I'm so honored to know you. So I asked 3 questions. The first 2, I know you are really into. What brings you hope at this time? Because you are the woman of hope. And what delights your soul?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'll just start by saying that I love those questions, love them, and love that we're having this conversation. And I love that this is called the Café of Delights. Very, very special name that you gave this, because I can already feel the delightfulness. And the word delight, as you probably know, since you named your cafe this, comes from of the light. And I really feel that that's what we're all looking for, how to be of the light, in the light, being enlightened, but also being of the light, which is delightful, full of being of the light. And what gives me hope is many things. And I'm going to see if I can tweak your question to say what do I see as the possibility of life? Somehow hope is got a certain ring to it that I can answer, and then I will also kind of answer my tweak question. What gives me hope is knowing that the human spirit always prevails. And from working in Ethiopia after the 1984-1985 famine, where 1 million people starved to death in the Rift Valley, you would think going there after that tragic event, I would have been depressed and devastated and, suicidal after seeing, the bones of starving babies and all that happened there. But what I experienced there was the power of the human spirit, the endurance of the human spirit, the resilience of the human spirit, the very core of who we are. And that gives me hope no matter what the circumstances. And that also leads me to the possibility. What do I see as the possibility? And I'll just say, because you opened it with this, really a nod to the challenges that we're facing now. I say this is the decisive decade, the 2020 to 2030. We're 3 years in, not yet 3 years in, 2 years and 8 months as we record this, into the decisive decade where so much has got to happen by 2030 in the climate crisis, where I am centered in most of my my sense of urgency, my sense of commitment, my sense of intentionality, my sense of focus, which includes social justice, the empowerment of women, listening to the voices of youth. It includes healing the political divide. It includes the horrendous resolution, not horrendous resolution, but horrendousness of inequality and finding the solution to that. The window called the climate crisis, because it's embedded in it, is a clock, a date, a kind of finality that is not in the other issues that I worked on all my life.
Mhm.
It is the container, I think, and the context and the possibility of resolving all the things that have gone on and on and on and on for millennium. Naomi Klein says the climate crisis is the best chance humanity's ever had to tackle everything that's been languishing, that we've been addressing but not resolving. And so I include in the climate crisis, it's the climate of thinking that's in crisis. It's also the atmosphere, it's the jet stream, it's the melting glaciers, it's the Amazon rainforest, it's the hole in the ozone, it's all of that, the pollution of rivers, the forests burning, the tragedy in Hawaii. The real climate crisis is the climate in the crisis in the climate of thinking that would have us produce the world we've produced, that's so far from who we know ourselves to be. So the climate crisis with a clock embedded in the middle of it, there's a point after which, you know, things go out of control and we have no agency any longer. And that clock is ticking, and is very heavily ticking now in this decade, because much needs to happen by 2030. It forces us to come together. It forces us to drop our biases about each other. It forces us to not try to figure out what we're going to work on. Are we going to work on poverty? We're going to work on hunger. We're going to work on child abuse. No, we need to work on all of it and use the clock of the climate crisis to get on the playing field, get off of our chairs, get back in communication, complete our grievances, get over our hurts and our traumas, and get on the playing field and turn this around. So that gives me hope. It's also the possibility of our time. And then what delights my soul in the midst of all that, kind of serious business called the future of life on Earth, is my grandchildren, is playing with my grandchildren, loving my grandchildren, and noticing that no matter what's going on in the world, joy still wells up in all of our hearts. And that's what keeps us sane and healthy, and gives us equanimity, and gives us the chance to laugh and to play and to dance. So what delights my soul is that I have grandchildren now. And, some of them are big. I have one living with us because she's in law school in San Francisco, and she's going to be a lawyer. She's graduated from college. She's in law school. And then I have, some littler ones that are all about when can they go on an overnight, or when they can come see grandma, and what they want for their birthday, and can they get a puppy, and all the way through from the littlest to the biggest. What delights me is the joy of youth, the joy of children, the joy of aliveness, the joy of children knowing that play is not an assignment, it's who they are. And when I'm with them, I remember that I know how to play, and that knowing how to play, knowing how to dance, remembering how to sing and be joyful and laugh, no matter what's going on in the world, is key to my own health and well-being, and in many ways is the central tenet of being alive.
Yeah. It's the key to us and who we are, that essence of play, the essence of joy, and really looking at the idea that there is an urgency. that calls us. And that brings me to your new book, Living a Committed Life, which I just finished last night. It's just amazing. Before we you talk about being a pro-activist, but before we go on, just your origin story is huge. So you said earlier, well, that could be all year. So we got a brief bio, and you want to add to that? Because I know doesn't mention the Pachamama Alliance and the work you do in the Amazon and the changing the dream of the Western world, which is what your book is about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just say that I'm from the Midwest. I was born and raised outside of Chicago, Illinois, and in a very healthy and wonderful family. My father was a great musician. He was a composer, a pianist, and ultimately his real love was his big band. He was a big band leader in the big band days, which many of the younger people heard about as something that happened long ago, but it was in my lifetime that the big band days were thriving. And it was really before television became our MO. And now, of course, television is sort of going into the background, and we're all on our devices. But there was a time when people gathered and danced and celebrated in the big hotels and at state fairs and outdoors and in resorts and in nightclubs. And nightclubs was really not the right term, more places where people could dance with dance floors. And my father was part of that. And my mother was a wonderful, lovely social activist, we would call her today. Back then, she was part of the auxiliary of this and the auxiliary of that. That's kind of where women were placed, off to the side, called the auxiliary.
Mm-hmm.
But she was very active in all the issues of her time. And my father died just before my 14th birthday, when I was an adolescent. So, and he died of a heart attack, very unsuspecting. That there was no warning. He died in his sleep. And so suddenly I was without a dad. And I remember, this is a little bit going way back, but I remember after he died, doing everything I could to be good. Be good to my mother, who was in just absolute devastation by her husband's death with no warning. She was 46 and he was 50.
Mm.
So they were he was a young man when he died. She had 4 children. She didn't know where the checkbook was. She didn't know where the safe deposit box was. She didn't know about the insurance. She was just like, oh my God, he's gone.
Yeah.
And watching her cope with all that really taught me how important it is to be a strong woman, and to know that ultimately life is in our hands, even though sometimes we have a very beautiful, strong man like you do, walking through the world with us. And so that might be some of the origin of my work with women. And then I got involved in ending world hunger through the Hunger Project after I took the EST training, which was a very powerful transformational program that changed my life. And I got involved in the Hunger Project through Werner Erhard, the founder of EST, and Buckminster Fuller, who was one of the great humanists of that time during that part of my life. And I did that for 20 years, working on ending world hunger, which took me to, even while I was having babies, I went to Bangladesh and India and Ethiopia and Guinea-Bissau and Gabon and Ghana and Zimbabwe, places working on ending world hunger and then raising money all over the world. And that was a love affair that it still lasts my whole life, really knowing that finding out I could make a difference with my life that would impact the lives of other people. And that set me on a path of being a pro-activist, which you use that term, but I'll just define it for people. I use the pro-activist term for myself rather than activist, because often activists show up for people as angry people who are against something. And of course, there's things I'm against. I'm against oppression. I'm against slavery. I'm against war. I'm against, inequality. There's a lot of things I'm against. But where I do my activism from is what I'm for. Mm-hmm. That's why I call myself a pro-activist. And I really learned that in the Hunger Project and working on ending world hunger. And it became even more relevant and powerful for me in working with Indigenous peoples of the Amazon, which is the Pachamama Alliance, which came to me in a series of visions and dreams that were quite mystical, that took me to the Ecuadorian Amazon at the base of the Andes in what's called the Sacred Headwaters, which is the most biodiverse place on earth. And one of the places I've taken you, Gale, and your wonderful partner,
Yes,
Mark,
yes, that was
to preserve the sacred headwaters of the Amazon, is to preserve the very source of life. So that's that work, and that's a very short version of what I think you're calling my origin story. And I'm doing that today. I'm still doing that today. I'm still working with women to empower women. I'm still looking at, I'm still engaged in freeing people from the constraints of living for money and money alone. And I'm always, no matter what I'm doing, working to create and foster transformation.
you really talk about the difference between change and transformation, and we just have a few minutes left. I'd like to get into this more when we take a break.
Okay.
So we have about 2 minutes left. Can you just briefly, and then we'll go into it a little bit more, talk about the difference between transformation and change? Because I love the distinction that you have in your book, Living a Committed Life.
Yeah, well, it comes from this this commitment of being a proactivist rather than against something, because change, in its very nature, it's very important to change, and everybody's changing every day, and everything is changing every day. So change is, central to life. But when we say we want to change, we're often pointing to something we think is wrong, and then pointing to something we think is right. So change, usually the dynamics of it, at least when we talk about it, especially in politics, or saying we don't like our weight or our job or our husband or whatever, we want to make a change. We make something wrong so that we can move to something that we're saying is right or better.
Right.
And that's a very important dynamic. I'm changing my diet right now so that I can be healthier at my age, etc. So I respect change. It has that dynamic in it that this is not right anymore, and something better is what we need to move to. Transformation doesn't do that. Transformation never points a finger at anything and says this is wrong, and it doesn't deny the past or invalidate it. It has it suddenly make sense. It completes something. It looks from the whole, or it gives you access to the whole, where you see all sides of everything, and all of that makes a whole. So that's my short version. And transformation always gets us in touch with a profound sense of responsibility, respect, and love, rather than freedom from something we're not so happy with into something we like better. Transformation has it all suddenly make sense. So I can say more about that after the break, but I want to make sure I don't make change wrong.
The
I just
only
love
constant in life is change, but so it's not coming from this is bad and we need to change it, but from a place of possibility, which is what you're all about. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to go more into living a committed life with Lynne Twist, and I'm your host, Gale West, and we are on the Café of Delights.
Imagine if you were truly flourishing, how would your financial expansion impact the world? Author of Money Come Dance With Me, Gale West is an internationally known speaker, creative catalyst, and business intuitive at Success with Soul. Work with Gale to create a new relationship with money as your friend. Link the soul of your business to the business of your soul with programs like Sacred Money Mastery, Akashic Records of the Soul, and more. To receive a healing money meditation, go to successwithsoul.com today.
Café of Delight, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. Tune into transformationtalkradio.com every second and fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We are at the precipice of one of the most exciting evolutions in human history. On Café of Delights, you will hear from those that are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. For more information on hope for a new reality, visit Gale West at successwithsoul.com. And we're back. I'm here Gale West, your host of the Café of Delights, with lovely Lynne Twist, the author of Living a Committed Life and The Soul of Money. So we've been talking about the difference between change and transformation. You want to go a little bit more into transformation?
Yeah, so transformation, I'll describe an experience of it, is when you shift your whole view. You suddenly re-see everything. And the word respect is a beautiful part of transformation, because the word respect comes from respectate, re-see. So, for example, when you have a transformation, let's say that someone calls you out as someone who has bias against, let's say, bias against corporations, for example, and you have you're mad at them and they're wrong and they're the big problem and they're taking all they care about is money, and then someone invites you into the belly of the beast of one of the big companies like Amazon or Nestle or an oil company for lunch at the company headquarters, and they tell you about what's going on inside the company and how the heart and soul of the company is really doing everything you can to address this, this, and this, and you realize, oh my God, this is just 1,000 people. It's not some big bad, horrible entity. It's people, and they're like me, and they love their children, and they want the world to work, and they're worried about crime, and they're worried about the climate crisis, and they want to make sure their grandmother lives to see their daughter's wedding, and suddenly there's no big bad companies anymore. There's just people, and you let go of a view, a point of view that has you stuck in a right, wrong, yes, no, either or situation. You realize, no, these are, you move from a shallow place of seeing the world to deep. There's a article that a friend of mine wrote, not left, not right, but deep. And when we go deep, or when we go higher, you could say, and we see it all, then our biases, our blind spots, our judgments, our bigotry falls away, and we see the whole picture, and suddenly it all makes sense. And so, I know a lot of people who had really, really difficult divorces, but then there's a point at which they either work with a good consultant like Gale or listen to a program like this, and then they have a revelation. I'll say it's often women who realized, oh my God, wait a minute. That man gave me those 3 children. That man kind of grew me up. He maybe made me really angry at the end there, and I realized it wasn't a fit anymore. But what a ride I had with him, and I'm so grateful for that marriage. I'm no longer bitter. I'm no longer angry. The whole thing makes sense. It was time for me to find my own independence. That's a transformation. So all of us have moments in our life where we re-see a situation, and suddenly we see the whole picture, and it makes sense, and we're not stuck in our angst or our anger or our judgment or our this isn't right and I have to change it. That's very important. I'm not dissing that. That step is really important, that being angry and upset that catalyzes change. But usually we need to insult something to make a change, whereas transformation is, oh my God, I now see the whole thing. So that's a little bit of a better description.
Well, you talk about in the book about changing the story, rewriting the story from a place of not being a victim, but from a place of a lot of us think of us as survivors of whatever, instead of who do we want to be? And so again, going back to this idea of I hate corporations to what's my responsibility as far as what do I buy?
Yes.
Am I supporting them? So
Right.
if I say I hate Amazon, but how and I keep buying from Amazon, where am I in the whole gamut of life, and what
Yeah.
is my responsibility, and how am I going to look at my story and rewrite it from
Yeah.
a place that is a possibility, and from a place of what you talk about, this proactivist thing, like what do we want instead of what don't we want?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really, it's, you could say, you know, some people might call it positive thinking, and I love that work that's been done by so many wonderful people. I call it grounded possibility, which is different than positive thinking.
Very
It's not putting a spin on something. It's recontextualizing it so that you have agency, responsibility, and power. And when we have agency, responsibility, we take responsibility and power, then we interact with things in a more effective way. So your beautiful example, you know, while I'll go, I'm sorry, I have to go pick up the Amazon box on my front steps. So that's got to interrupt this conversation about the horrible company. What's that called? Amazon? Oh, there's somebody on my front steps. I need to go answer the door, and then it's an Amazon thing. You know, the inconsistency with our judgments often. And I love that you're asking about this, because I think that's what's really coming to a head in the world today. Our let's see, to really look at our own integrity. You know, we are demanding oil from oil companies every single day. Everything we have, this clock, the computer, my shirt, my glasses are made from oil. And I'm going to get in my car this afternoon and drive somewhere. And I have a hybrid, but it does take some fuel. You know, it's not like oil companies are evil. We're all complicit in a culture, a story that is taking us off a cliff if we don't change it. And but we live in a narrative that it's somebody else's responsibility, and that narrative doesn't serve us. So we are being asked, demanded by the climate crisis, by what happened in Hawaii, by what's happening in the hurricane that's coming to Florida, to humble ourselves and not have so many opinions about everything and go to work. And that's a transformation, really. To get into action is a transformation for many people, because it's easy to criticize and point fingers and be angry. But at the same time, you know, it's easy and it's useful to some degree, but eventually we need to go to work and own it. And I do say in the book, and I'll say to you right now, because your program is about this in many ways. I don't think we really live in our lives the way we think we do. I don't think we really live in our marriages or our relationships the way we think we do. I don't think we really live in our communities or our families or our companies or our jobs or our world in the way we think we do. We live in the conversation we have about our lives.
Right.
We live in the conversation we have about our relationship, the conversation we have about our community, the have about our family. We live in the conversation we have about our job. We live in the conversation we have about the world. That conversation we have total omnipotence over. We may not have omnipotence over the world, or sometimes even our own marriage or relationships, but we have absolute omnipotence over the conversation we have about that. And that's where the levers and dials of life actually are. Because when the conversation or the narrative shifts, so does the reality for us. That's where we live. So if divorce is one hellish thing, and you hate him and you hate the lawyers and you're pissed off, you live in that conversation. If you live, the reason I'm using this example is I just talked to somebody who wrote a book called a divorce attorney who get you through the battleground so you stay married. She's a divorce attorney. But what she does is take battle-weary couples and lead them to a place where they can stay married and thrive. And that's actually a conversation, a very powerful shift in a conversation. She had a shift in her own story about her marriage. She changed the story. She changed the marriage. Now, I'm making it sound so simple that people will say, what is she talking about? But when you think about it, even on a smaller scale, being a victim is no fun. And when you shift a conversation away from being a victim of anything and actually look and see, where am I responsible for the situation I'm in? That's a different story, story. It's also a different narrative. It's also a different level of conversation. So conversation and how we talk about things and how we talk to ourselves has enormous power over what actions we take, how we show up in life, and who we consider ourselves to be. And I think that's what you're asking me to display.
And you talk a lot about intention. Your book is all about commitment and taking a stand. So, and there is a way that I was in a conversation with a group of people, and they were talking about how I'm in such despair over the climate crisis. I just go into this place of despair, and I'm like, and I said, this is an incredible opportunity. And they're looking at me like, oh, you're just a Pollyanna. And that's what I said when Trump was elected. I know so many people were upset, but I said, this is a wake-up call. Excuse me, we've been sleeping. This is a wake-up call. This shows you how divided we are, and you can't deal with cockroaches when they're in the walls. When they're out, you can say, oh, there's been a problem. And we as human beings are, what you're saying, are incredibly creative. We created the problem, we can fix the problem.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the good news. We're not flawed, we're mistaken. That's a very different thing. If we were flawed, it would be hopeless. And sometimes we just think, oh, if human beings got off the planet, everything would be much better. Actually, that's not the case. We're necessary to the evolution of life. We're key to it. We're in the Anthropocene now. And, you know, when you use the example of our former president, the despair is a space that is not completely inauthentic or not useful. You just can't stay there. You know, when my father died, I was in horrendous despair. I wasn't sure I wanted to live, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, I took that event and realized I'm going to live the life he would be so proud of. So I used my father's death, which was a tragedy in my life, as a strength. And yesterday I was in a meeting where someone used the term post-traumatic strength, post-traumatic growth,
I love it.
Traumatic transformation. Because everybody has traumas. We have them all the time. I'm going to have a lot more before I die. But am I going to use them to wallow in being a victim of something, or am I going to use it to strengthen who I am? Am I going to use the trauma to get a bunch of people to get in a room with me and cry and heal through, you know, hashing it over? Sometimes that is exactly what's needed for a while, but not forever. Because then you take all of that and you make something out of it and you get stronger. You grow from it. All of us know that our growth has primarily come from things that we didn't want to happen to us, rather than, you know, some wonderful teacher in school. Yes, we grow from that. We admire people, but real growth comes from, you know, breakdowns. That's when we have a breakthrough. So I think you're really pointing to how important it is for people to live in what we're calling, you and I, what we live in, grounded possibility. And yes, go in despair about the climate crisis and the extinction of species, but don't stay there and have the despair catapult you into a level of responsibility and action and change the story, as you did when the election took place that you didn't support, to, it's all coming to the surface, the stuff we haven't paid any attention to. This is a good thing.
Yeah.
Now we can address it. You can't address it if you don't see it. You can't address it if you can't feel it. You don't address it if you can't, if it doesn't show its unfortunate head. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And it's almost like a frame of reference or an attitude for life that keeps you in the Café of Delight. And that is knowing that you have agency over how you interpret, see, speak about, and shape your relationship with what is. That's the levers and dials of a transformed, productive, and happy life. And I know you do that because you've done that for me.
I had 2 strokes in 2020, and I actually thank my strokes. And people go, huh? But it was a wake-up call. It really, even though I still have a few things that are left, and I'm very grateful that I was able to heal that, and that it was a call to action. It was a call to look at my life and say, what do I want next? Who do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about those traumas that could be really horrible, or those traumas that could be, hello, I'm here. It's an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look.
Yeah. And I love this phrase, post-traumatic grauth, because that's really, that's where we want to live. We're going to have, we even have pre-traumatic syndrome now because of the fear of the climate situation. But whatever it is, make it something that gives you growth rather than set you back. And if you set that context in place as you have in your life, the most wonderful things unfold out of these horrendous events. Right. They're just, they become a disguised gift and blessing to take you where you need to go next.
And, and be the change you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Be the change you want to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if everyone did that, it'd be an amazing world.
And I forgot about your strokes because you don't act like you ever had them. You're certainly not someone someone would say, oh my God, poor Gale. No one's ever going to say that about you. You won't let them.
No, that's not who I am.
You're never going to be a victim of anything. And then, maybe for like a minute, if somebody, cut you off and smashed up your car, but then you'd be talking about how grateful you are you didn't get hurt. I mean, I could tell, and you wouldn't even be too angry with the person, So you're such a beautiful example of that, Gale.
Thank you. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'd like to go a little bit more into how do people take a stand for their own lives and really living a committed life, because that's what we all want. So this is Café of Delights. I'm your host, Gale West, and we will be back in a few minutes.
Imagine if you were truly flourishing, how would your financial expansion impact the world? Author of Money Come Dance With Me, Gale West is an internationally known speaker, creative catalyst, and business intuitive at Success with Soul. Work with Gale to create a new relationship with money as your friend. Link the soul of your business to the business of your soul with programs like Sacred Money Mastery, Akashic Records of the Soul, and more. To receive a healing money meditation, go to successwithsoul.com today.
Café of Delight, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. Tune into transformationtalkradio.com every second and fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We are at the precipice of one of the most exciting evolutions in human history. On Café of Delights, you will hear from those that are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. For more information on hope for a new reality, visit Gale West at successwithsoul.com. And this is Café of Delights. I'm your host, Gale West, and we're back with Lynne Twist, the most amazing woman on the planet.
Oh my goodness, that's a little that's a little bit much.
You're one of the um, kindest, most generous women I know.
Mm.
And your heart is so huge that and filled with love and hope and delight for everyone you meet and who you know.
Mm.
I've seen that over and over and over again in you, and just I'm really honored to know you.
Thank you, Gale. I love you too.
So I'd like to go a little bit more into how in your book, Living a Committed Life, uh, and so how can people get to know you and in your work? It's what's your website?
My website is soulofmoney.org. And if you go to soulofmoney.org, you'll learn about me and my colleague Sarah Vetter and my colleague Reverend Deborah Johnson and all the work we do, which includes courses about freeing your the kind of freeing our enslavement to the money system and the commercial culture, and also courses about fundraising, since I've done a lot of fundraising in my life. And the Soul of Money courses are really about how to liberate yourself in a way that money doesn't rule you. You use it to have the life you love. And then also I'm doing a lot of work to empower women. And I think this is the Sophia century. This is the 21st century. It's not just the first 100 years. It's the first 100 years. It is the first 100 years of the third millennium. And we're only 23 years, not even, into the third millennium. And I say that against the backdrop of 2020 to 2030 being the decisive decade, because the choices we make will impact the future of life for the next 1,000 years. So there's this urgency, and then there's this really remarkable long view, which I call Sophia century. So that's a century that has been prophesied by many, many cultures this century to be the century when divine feminine wisdom will come through and the patriarchy will calm down and the divine feminine wisdom will get fully expressed both in men and women, and humanity will soar. And I'm not only an advocate for that and a voice for it and a lover of that, I am a stand to make that happen. And what that means to me is not an opinion or a point of view, but actually a commitment with my life to stand in a place where this is the century where the total and complete transformation of the inequality of life, the gender inequality, all the other inequalities gets completely and totally transformed, not changed, but transformed through the power of the divine feminine, which is the word Sophia century. The word Sophia comes from the Greek term for ancient wisdom. And because I work with Indigenous people who are in touch with ancient wisdom and have been passing it down generation after generation after generation after generation, and it's robust and alive and not watered down at all, in fact, strengthened by each generation. I'm in touch with how powerful ancient wisdom is, especially in a sea of information like we have now, where you can, click on Google or Bing or Wikipedia and find out literally anything about anyone and everything about everything, the whole history of the world. So we're heavy on information and very, very hungry, have a big appetite for wisdom. And the wisdom that we really have an appetite for, I think, is spiritual wisdom, feminine wisdom, ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom, wisdom that comes through from some universal evolutionary source, rather than someone's opinion or someone's, good fortune of their education. That's different. This wisdom is what comes through you, what you tap into when you're your best self. Yeah. Everybody has it. And I'm an advocate for bringing it to the surface and having it be as powerful as our commitment to the material world, which is pretty darn powerful. So if this were in the material world, our commitment to the spiritual world needs to come up and meet our enormous addiction and obsession with the material world and balance. And that's the same thing with the masculine and the feminine. Masculine's very, very strong right now. The feminine has been disempowered, discounted. And as it rises, the masculine will begin to relax a little bit. So it's a very, very important and powerful time. And that's what our courses at the Soul of Money Institute are about. We have one starting in October called the Sophia Circle, which is really about women claiming their power, not only because it'll be good for them, but the world is craving and calling for women to step up and express themselves way more fully than ever in history. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that are in my book. And the stand I've taken is to bring forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just human presence on this planet. And that stand is not a point of view or a position. It's a place to live and work from. And when we take a stand, as Archimedes said 2,000 years ago, give me a place to stand and I'll move the world. You can and you do. That's what Martin Luther King did. He was a stand taker. He didn't just have points of view. He rose above points of view, positions on the game board, to see the whole picture. And from there is where you stand. And when you take a stand, you relinquish your point of view, your position, your opinion. And when you relinquish that, what you get in its place is vision of all points of view, vision of all points of positions on the game board. You can see the whole. And that's really my commitment, is to stand there and honor and respect all points of view as we move forward to an evolutionary leap that we all know is imminent and is happening.
Well, there's this idea of the path. You're on the path, you're off the path. I think what you're talking about is recognizing that we're all divine. We all come here with a purpose or a mission, and that purpose and mission guides us. Mm-hmm. And when we're connected to it, that is the stand. Mm-hmm. Stand for what we came to do, how we came to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And so many people are aching, absolutely aching to find that out. And what you're talking about is we look for things to fill that. It doesn't fill it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you're so right.
You have this thing about scarcity and the myth of scarcity. Let's go into that a little bit, because that, I think, is what we're talking about. Taking ourselves out of the conversation of scarcity and the myth of scarcity into a place of really prosperity. And I look at the origin of the word wealth is well-being.
Yes.
Like, hello. Mm-hmm. To that place of real wealth. Mm-hmm. And well-being.
Mm-hmm. Well, scarcity is a mindset. There is real scarcity in some places and in some situations. I know that very intimately. I worked on hunger and poverty. So, I know.
Yeah.
Places where people don't have enough water, they don't have enough food, they don't have enough access. That is very real. What I think you're asking me to talk about is the mindset of scarcity that those of us who are just actually probably fine have, that we need more of anything, of everything, that we don't have enough. We're not pretty enough. We're not tall enough. We're not young enough. We're not successful enough. We're not happy enough.
Enough.
Not this and that. And we need more of this and more of that and more of this and more of that. And that scarcity mentality, that false sense of scarcity, what I call the scarcity mindset, the condition of scarcity, I actually call it the lie of scarcity, which is pretty damning, but I think it's true. We live in a kind of lie of scarcity because the commercial culture and the marketing culture and all of that tells us we're not okay until we acquire or add or buy or do more, take more. So this condition of scarcity has three toxic myths embedded in it. The first is a belief that there's not enough to go around and someone's always going to be left out, and it better not be you. So the there's not enough mentality has us behave inconsistent with our humanity with one another. There's not enough. It's not enough. I'm not enough. It starts to be embedded in who we see ourselves to be. So the scarcity mentality begins, or the scarcity lie condition of thinking begins with the there's not enough. There's not enough. And no matter what, there's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough this. There's not enough that. There's not enough sleep. There's not enough vacation. There's not enough sex. We live in a there's not enough hamster wheel. And it's a story. And the second toxic myth is more is better. More of anything is better. More blue jeans, more black pants, more square feet in my house, more this, more that, more market share, more. And it's so pervasive and so automatic pilot that we don't discern when it is accurate that we need more and when it isn't. We're just on a more track all the time. And that's why we have this burgeoning waste industry and this huge storage industry, which are kind of poster industries for the more is better culture. And then the third toxic myth is that's just the way that it is. And the third toxic myth being that's just the way that it is holds the whole thing in place. And that's an unconscious, unexamined belief. There's not enough, more is better. That's just the way that it is. Those three things are the three toxic myths that hold the scarcity mindset in place. And when you blow that out of the water, what you find out is there's enough. There's always been enough. You are enough. You have enough. And from there, you, out of appreciation and gratitude, the enoughness grows. But not because there's lack, it's because there is enough. And that's the source of true abundance. As you say, the meaning of the word wealth, or the etymology of it, is well-being. And that's what we really want. And well-being comes from an understanding that there is a well of being that we draw on, and that is infinite. There's always enough in the well of being for everyone, everywhere, to have the life they need.
And if you think about it, one of the things you talk about in your book is that there is enough to go around to feed the people in the world.
Yes,
and if we come from a place of generosity and collaboration, which I really feel is the new paradigm that we're looking for. This is a new paradigm of humanity, a paradigm of generosity and collaboration, and recognizing that we are all in this together.
You know, Gandhi said there's enough for our need, but not for our greed.
Yeah.
And that's a very simple way of saying what you're saying. There is enough, absolutely, but not if there's people in the just, building McMansions that they don't need with one kid, or, getting the next plane, the next boat, the next this. And I don't mean to just pick on the uber wealthy, but they are a problem. That anybody would be a billionaire is ridiculous. Yeah. No one needs that kind of money. So there's an enough that we don't recognize. We race right past it towards more, and we don't even know that enough happened. And if we could center ourselves in enough or sufficiency, it would change everything about the way we live, and we would be in constant, and we will be, those of us who are listening to this and choosing this, and Gale, you're one of them, people who already lives in, you're in constant gratitude. Oh my God, I love that I have a taco in front of me. Somebody made this. Looks so delicious. It smells so good. I can feel the loving hands that put it together. Or I'm so thrilled that I have a cup of coffee that I can drink. Somebody grew these beans, my God, and the sun nourished them, and the soil gave it nutrients. And then somebody picked it, and then it was roasted, and then it was, that's not outside my door. So it was brought to me by perhaps trucks and boats, I don't know. And then it went to the grocery store, and they had to put it on the right shelf and price it. And now I get to buy it and make my coffee and drink it. But my God, how awesome is this cup of coffee? How awesome is this cup of coffee? Like that. That
Yeah.
way of living is filled with satisfaction and no scarcity.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lynn. This has been incredible. And your website is soulofmoney.org, right?
Yes.
Your latest book is Living a Committed Life, which is incredible.
Yes.
And your other book is called The Soul of Money, and you are the most amazing woman on the planet. I'm so excited and honored to have you today.
Thank you, Gail. And the next course I'm leading, I just want to put a little plug in for that because we're just in our enrollment phase. It's called the Sophia Circle. And it's a 6 months course for women, women who dare to live a bigger life than they're living now.
Yeah.
And I want to work with as many of you as possible. And I know that everybody wants to be like Gail, so my course will help you be like Gail.
And this is the Café of Delights. I'm your host, Gale West, and we are live every second and fourth Thursday of the month. And thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Mwah.
Thank you for tuning in to Café of Delights, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. Listen or watch live every second and fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com for a series of riveting interviews from those who are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. From science to spirituality, culture, arts, and new economies, and more, we will explore how to create a world where all can thrive. For more information on hope for a new reality, visit me, Gale West, at successwithsoul.com.